Bilal ibn Rabah's Ray was born into a world that saw him as nothing more than property, a slave owned by masters who believed his worth was determined by color and status. Yet, deep within Bilal's heart, there was a flame that no chain could contain. He lived in Makkah during a time when slavery was accepted and cruelty toward the weak was common. But destiny had chosen Bilal for a far greater role, to become one of the earliest believers and a living symbol of Islam's message of equality and spiritual freedom. When the message of Islam began to spread quietly among the people of Makkah, Bilal heard the words that would change his life forever. The call to worship one God all alone. The Prophet Muhammad's message of divine unity and justice touched his soul. For the first time, Bilal heard that in the eyes of Allah, all human beings are equal, that no one has superiority over another except by faith and righteousness. These words broke through the mental walls of slavery and filled his heart with hope. He accepted Islam without hesitation, knowing that this decision would cost him everything: his safety, his body, and possibly his life. When his master, Umayyah ibn Khalaf, discovered Bilal's conversion, he was enraged. He dragged Bilal into the scorching desert, stripped him of his dignity, and placed a massive stone upon his chest. The heat of the sand burned his skin, and the weight of oppression pressed down on his lungs. Yet, through unbearable pain, Bilal uttered a single word that shook the foundations of disbelief: Ahad, Ahad, one. His voice cracked, but his faith remained unbroken. Each repetition was a declaration that no amount of torture could enslave the heart that knew its creator. The tormentors beat him, mocked him, and demanded that he renounce Islam, but he only responded with that same divine proclamation. When Abu Bakr Suraif saw the brutality inflicted upon Bilal, his heart was filled with compassion. He went to Umayyah and offered to purchase Bilal's freedom. The price was steep, but Abu Bakr paid it without hesitation, for he knew that no gold could equal the worth of a soul that stood firm for Allah. And so, Bilal walked free, not only from physical chains, but from the chains of human oppression. His first steps as a free man were steps of faith, guided by the Prophet's message of unity and dignity. Bilal's freedom was not the end of his journey, it was the beginning of a greater purpose. The Prophet appointed him as the first muazzin of Islam, the one who would call the believers to prayer. His voice, once raised in cries of pain, now rose in praise of Allah. Each call to prayer echoed the same truth. He had cried in the desert, Allah is one. The man, once oppressed for his faith, became the voice that summoned millions to worship. Bilal's Ray lived the rest of his life with humility and devotion. Even after the Prophet's passing, his heart could not bear to recite the Adhan, for every word reminded him of his beloved messenger. When he finally called it again years later, the people of Medina wept, remembering the days when that same voice called in a prayer beside the Prophet. Bilal's story is one of faith that conquered fear, love that transcended suffering, and dignity that no man could take away. From the scorching sands of slavery to the heights of honor in Islam, Bilal ibn Rabah's rave stands as a timeless example of what it means to choose faith over fear and truth over tyranny. His story whispers to every believer that true freedom begins not with the breaking of chains, but with the surrender of the heart to Allah alone. The story of Bilal ibn Rabah is one of the most profound examples of steadfastness in the face of unimaginable suffering. Born into slavery in Makkah, Bilal Saraif had no wealth, status, or worldly power, yet he possessed something far greater, an unbreakable faith in the oneness of Allah. When the message of Islam began to spread quietly through the early believers, Bilal's heart recognized its truth. In a society where idols filled the Kaaba and oppression ruled over justice, his acceptance of Islam was an act of immense courage. When his master, Umayyah ibn Khalaf, discovered his conversion, he was furious. To him, Bilal's belief was not only rebellion but humiliation. A slave daring to follow the new message brought by Muhammad. Umayyah sought to crush that belief through pain. He dragged Bilal into the scorching desert, stripped him of clothing, and forced him to lie on the burning sand under the blazing Arabian sun. With every breath, the ground beneath him seared his skin, and with every beat of his heart, his faith grew stronger. Huge stones were placed upon his chest, pressing down with unbearable weight. Umayyah would taunt him, demanding he renounce his belief and return to idol worship. But Bilal's rage did not beg, did not break, and did not scream. Instead, from his lips came the words that would echo through the centuries, Ahad, Ahad, one, one. He repeated it again and again, his voice weak yet unshaken, his body chained yet his soul soaring free. These two words became the anthem of resistance against tyranny, the pure cry of a heart that refused to surrender to anything other than Allah. The Quraysh, in their cruelty, would parade him before the people, hoping his suffering would deter others from accepting Islam, yet it had the opposite effect. Bilal's perseverance became a beacon of inspiration for the early Muslims, a living testament that truth is worth every sacrifice. His silence between cries of Ahad was not a sign of defeat. It was the calm strength of a man whose heart had already submitted to a higher master. When Abu Bakr's Ray saw the torment Bilal endured, he could not stand by. He approached Umayyah and purchased Bilal's freedom, declaring, Bilal is a free man. But Bilal had already achieved true freedom long before the chains were removed. His heart had been liberated from fear, from servitude to man, and from attachment to this world. The chains on his wrists had only bound his body, his soul was beyond their reach. Even after his freedom, Bilal never forgot the pain he endured for Allah's sake. Yet he bore no resentment, no bitterness, only gratitude that Allah had chosen him to be tested in such a way. The Prophet later honored him by appointing him the first muazzin of Islam, his voice chosen to call the believers to prayer. Each time he proclaimed live, Allahu Akbar, it was not just a call to worship. It was a declaration that the same faith that survived torture was now guiding a growing nation. Bilal's endurance under torture teaches the world that faith is not proven by words, but by the strength to remain firm when every comfort is stripped away. His story is a reminder that pain can polish the soul, and that steadfastness in the path of truth brings a freedom no power on earth can take away. The fire that was meant to destroy him only purified his spirit. The stones that weighed upon his chest became the foundation of his eternal honor. And the desert that once heard his cries of Ahad, Ahad, will forever testify that no force can break a heart that beats for Allah. In a world where power, wealth, and social status often define a person's worth, the story of Bilal ibn Rabah's Ray stands as a timeless reminder of what true honor means in the sight of Allah. Bilal was born into slavery, his skin dark, his lineage humble, and his life marked by hardship. Yet within him burned a light so bright that it would outshine the arrogance of the wealthy and the pride of the powerful. When Islam came, it found in Bilal a heart ready to embrace the truth, and through him, Allah revealed one of the most profound realities of faith, that no human being is superior to another except through righteousness. Before Islam, Arabia was a society deeply divided by race, tribe, and status. Slaves were treated as property, their humanity denied. Bilal's life was one of endurance under the harsh hand of his master, Umayyah ibn Khalaf, a man who saw him as nothing more than a tool to serve his desires. But when Bilal heard the message of the Prophet Muhammad, that there is no God but Allah, and that all people are equal before him, he found the courage to break his chains from within. He declared his belief openly, even as it brought upon him unimaginable torture. His cry, Ahad, Ahad, one true God, became a symbol of defiance and faith, echoing across time as the voice of the oppressed proclaiming the oneness of the Creator. The power of equality in Islam was not just spoken, it was lived. The Prophet treated Bilal not as a slave freed from bondage, but as a brother in faith. He elevated him to one of the most honorable positions in the Muslim community. The muazzin, the one who calls believers to prayer. When Bilal's voice rang out with the first add-on, It was more than just a call to worship. It was a declaration that in Islam, faith, not race or social rank, defines a person's value. The desert that once witnessed his suffering now echoed with his call to Allah, a sound of freedom that reached every heart. Islam's message of equality was revolutionary. It confronted the pride of Quraysh nobles, who could not fathom seeing a black man stand shoulder to shoulder with them in prayer. Yet the Prophet stood firm, saying that Bilal was one of the dwellers of paradise. In that moment, the walls of prejudice began to crumble. Bilal's presence was a living testament to the verse of the Quran. Indeed, the most honored of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Quran 49:21. This verse did not remain mere words on a page. It transformed societies and hearts, beginning with the one who had once been enslaved but was now free in every sense. Even after the Prophet's passing, Bilal's faith remained a symbol of humility and steadfastness. He could not bear to call the Adhan again in Medina, for each word reminded him of his beloved Prophet Yet, when he was once asked to give the call again, his voice trembled with love and grief, and the people wept as if the Prophet had returned. In that moment, it became clear that honor lies not in wealth or color, but in sincerity and devotion. Bilal ibn Rabah's journey from a slave to one of the most respected figures in Islam is a reflection of the divine justice and mercy that Islam brought to the world. His life teaches that faith erases man-made hierarchies and that Allah looks not at our faces or status, but at our hearts. The story of Bilal is the story of every believer who finds strength in faith, dignity in humility, and equality in submission to Allah. Through him, Islam continues to proclaim that in the eyes of the Creator, all are one, united by faith, equal in worth, and honored only by righteousness. When Bilal ibn Rabah stood on the rooftop of the Prophet's mosque and raised his voice to proclaim the first adhan, history was being written in the most profound way. A man once chained and beaten for saying ahad, one God, was now calling the entire community to the worship of the one he had been tortured for believing in. It was not just a moment of sound. It was a declaration that the message of Islam had taken root in the hearts of the believers. Bilal's voice became the echo of faith that would transcend time, race, and nations. The Prophet Muhammad had chosen Bilal for the sacred duty, not because of his status, wealth, or lineage, but because of the purity of his heart and the strength of his conviction. His voice, deep and soulful, carried not only the words of the call, but also the emotion of one who had lived through the fires of oppression. Every Allahu Akbar that came from his lips was a victory cry against those who once sought to silence him. His call to prayer symbolized the rise of truth over falsehood, freedom over servitude, and faith over fear. The adhan was more than a signal for prayer. It was the anthem of a new world built on unity and submission to Allah alone. As Bilal's voice echoed through Medina, it reached hearts that once worshipped idols, turning them toward the Creator of all. The community would pause, their hearts aligning in remembrance of Allah, drawn by the rhythm of those sacred words. It was through Bilal's call that believers were reminded of their shared purpose, to stand shoulder to shoulder, equal before their Lord. This moment also marked a revolutionary message for humanity. A former slave, once deemed inferior in the eyes of society, was chosen to be the voice of Islam. The Prophet in doing so, dismantled centuries of racial and social hierarchy. Bilal's role as the muazzin of Islam declared that honor in the sight of Allah comes only through righteousness. His rise was not just personal redemption, it was the embodiment of divine justice. Islam had come to restore dignity to the downtrodden and to uplift the oppressed. Through Bilal, Allah demonstrated that faith, not birth, defines greatness. Bilal's devotion to the Prophet was profound and sincere. He had stood by the Prophet through battles, migration, and hardship. Each time he called the adhan, it was as if his heart poured out love for his Creator and for the messenger who had freed him. After the Prophet's passing, Bilal could no longer bring himself to make the call, for every word reminded him of the one he loved most. When he finally gave the adhan again years later in Medina, the sound of his voice broke the silence of longing. The people of the city wept as if the prophet I had returned, their hearts trembling with emotion. It was a moment that captured the depth of love between a servant of Allah and his messenger. Bilal ibn Rabah's ray remained a symbol of unshakable faith until his final breath. His life teaches that true honor is found in obedience to Allah and steadfastness in truth, no matter one's past or position. Every time the adhan is heard around the world today, it carries within it the echo of Bilal's original call, a voice that rose from slavery to glory, from pain to peace. His legacy endures as a reminder that the most powerful sound in the world is the one that calls hearts to Allah. Loyalty to the Prophet, love beyond words. The story of Bilal ibn Rabah, Ray, is not just one of faith and endurance, but of profound love, a love that transcended pain, status, and even life itself. Bilal's bond with the Prophet Muhammad was not built on wealth or lineage. It was rooted in shared belief, respect, and a mutual love for Allah. To understand Bilal's heart is to see how true loyalty manifests, quiet, unwavering, and everlasting. Bilal's ray was among the earliest believers in the message of Islam. His acceptance of the faith came at a time when doing so meant persecution, and yet when he heard the Prophet proclaim the unness of Allah, something within his soul awoke. In that moment, his connection to the Prophet was formed not through words or promises, but through the recognition of truth. It was as if Bilal had been waiting all his life to hear that message, and once he did, there was no turning back. When Bilal's ray was tortured by his master, his body bore the scars of cruelty, but his tongue carried only the words, Ahad, Ahad. The Prophet heard of Bilal's suffering, and his heart was filled with compassion and sorrow. He understood that Bilal was not only enduring pain for his own faith, but also standing firm for the message he was sent to deliver. Moved by his perseverance, the Prophet made sure Bilal was freed, showing the world that Islam stands for justice, mercy, and the elevation of the oppressed. From that moment on, Bilal's love for the Prophet deepened beyond measure, and his loyalty became an inseparable part of his identity. The Prophet, recognizing Bilal's sincerity and steadfastness, chose him to be the first muazzin of Islam, the voice that would call believers to prayer. Every time Bilal's voice echoed, Allahu Akbar, it was not merely a call to worship. It was a call born of love and devotion. His heart would tremble with emotion when he called the adhan, knowing that the Prophet was listening. The Prophet's gentle smile, his appreciative glance, and his kind words to Bilal were rewards that no worldly honor could match. After the passing of the Prophet the light in Bilal's life dimmed. The city of Medina felt empty without the presence of the messenger he loved so deeply. Bilal found it impossible to stand in the same spot and call the adhan again, for every phrase reminded him of the Prophet's face, his steps toward the mosque, his serenity in prayer. The pain of separation was unbearable, and so Bilal decided to leave Medina, unable to continue the duty that once brought him joy. This was not abandonment, but an expression of grief so deep that his heart could no longer carry the weight of love and loss together. Years later, when Bilal's Ra'i visited Medina, once more the people begged him to call the adhan again. With tears streaming down his face, he agreed. As his voice rose once more, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, the city broke into tears. Old companions wept openly, remembering the days when the Prophet would emerge at the sound of that call. It was as if Bilal's voice had brought back the memory of the Prophet for one final time, reviving the hearts that missed him. Bilal ibn Rabah's rave loved the Prophet, and not in words, but in actions, in faith, in sacrifice, and in devotion that outlived the Prophet himself. His loyalty teaches us that true love in Islam is not about emotion alone. It is about service, sincerity, and remembrance. Through Bilal, we learn that the purest form of love is to remain loyal even when the beloved is gone, and to keep their message alive through faith and deeds. Bilal ibn Rabah's ray stands as one of the most powerful symbols of faith, equality, and dignity in Islamic history. Born into slavery in pre-Islamic Makkah, Bilal's life was marked by oppression and humiliation at the hands of a society that valued lineage, wealth, and race above humanity. Yet through the light of Islam, he rose from the lowest depths of bondage to become one of the most honored figures in the Muslim world. His story is not one of mere escape from slavery. It is a transformation of the soul, a revolution of the spirit, and a testament to the power of faith that transcends all worldly boundaries. When Bilal first heard the message of Islam, his heart recognized its truth before his mind could question its consequences. The call to worship one God alone struck a deep chord within him, for he had long felt the emptiness of idols and the cruelty of human arrogance. His acceptance of Islam was not a quiet choice. It was an act of defiance against a system that treated him as property. When his master, Umayyah ibn Khalaf, discovered his faith, he unleashed upon Bilal the worst forms of torture, hoping to break his spirit. Yet, under the scorching sun, as stones crushed his chest and whips tore his flesh, Bilal uttered only one phrase, ahad, ahad, one. Each repetition was a declaration of freedom, a proclamation that his heart belonged to none but Allah. In that moment, Bilal taught the world that true dignity does not come from status or freedom of the body, but from steadfastness in belief. The chains that bound him were nothing compared to the inner strength that faith had given him. His silence, his endurance, his tears, they were all forms of worship. Even his torturer could not understand how a slave could possess such power. But Bilal's power came from a realm that no tyrant could touch. When Abu Bakr purchased his freedom, Bilal did not simply become a free man. He became a symbol of what Islam came to achieve. The Prophet Muhammad, who called all humanity to equality, honored Bilal not as a freed slave, but as a brother in faith. The Prophet appointed him as the first muazzin of Islam, giving him the sacred duty of calling believers to prayer. Every time Bilal raised his voice to say, Allahu Akbar, the words echoed across Makkah as a victory over oppression, a declaration that the message of Allah had triumphed over the arrogance of men. Bilal's rise shattered the racial and social hierarchies of his time. In a world where blackness was mocked and servitude meant shame, Bilal's faith made him one of the most respected companions of the Prophet. When Islam spread across the world, it was Bilal's voice that announced its presence, his example that embodied its spirit, and his struggle that reminded believers that no soul is superior to another except through righteousness. After the death of the Prophet, Bilal's heart broke. He could not bear to call the adhan again, for every word reminded him of the Prophet's smile, his gentleness, and his guidance. When he finally gave the adhan years later in Medina, his voice trembled with emotion, and the entire city wept, longing for the days when the messenger of Allah, walked among them. Bilal's legacy continues to inspire every believer who faces discrimination, hardship, or injustice. His life teaches that Islam is not a religion of privilege, but of principle, not a faith of power, but of purity. From the deserts of Arabia to the hearts of Muslims today, Bilal ibn Rabah's ray remains the eternal voice of equality, a man who proved that true honor lies not in color, wealth, or lineage, but in unwavering devotion to Allah and the pursuit of universal brotherhood and dignity.